All right, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Jack Schneider and I'm with the marketing team at Scrum Alliance. I'd like to welcome you to this innovative approach to our webinars. This is the Collaboration at Scale webinar series designed for Scrum-centric organizations with more than 10 Scrum teams. This series provides focused, outcome-driven solutions to collaboration problems faced by CSBOs, Scrum Masters, and Scrum teams. This is a very interactive webinar that requires your participation as the audience, so be sure to listen closely to our presenters about how to participate. At the end of the webinar, we'll present you with a poll question to help us decide the topic of the next webinar. Now before we get started, I want to cover a few administrative items. This webinar is voice over IP. If you are experiencing any technical difficulties, please try logging out, refreshing, and joining again. We will be live tweeting today with the hashtag SAMW17 for Scrum Alliance Webinar 2017. You can also follow us along on Twitter at Scrum Alliance and at Continuo Inc. to get details on how to participate in picking our upcoming webinars. This webinar is being recorded and will be available to you along with the presentation slides. We will email you the links to these items once they have been added to the website. These are typically available within 1 to 2 days, and this webinar is also good for one Category B SEU. All participants will remain muted during the webinar, and you can ask questions in the chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. And once the presenters have finished the presentation, they will begin answering questions. If we do run out of time, we will answer the remaining questions within a Q&A document after the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. First, I would like to introduce Ellen Gottesdiener. Ellen helps product and development communities produce valuable outcomes throughout product agility. She is a pioneer in the collaborative convergence of Agile product management, product requirements, and organizational learning. Ellen is a coach, facilitator, trainer, speaker, and writer. Her most recent book, co-authored with Mary Gorman, is Discover to Deliver, Agile Product Planning and Analysis. She is the author of 2 other acclaimed books, Requirements by Collaboration, and the Software Requirements Memory Jogger. Ellen is Chief Product Owner and founder of EBG Consulting, which helps product management and development organizations amplify discovery to accelerate delivery. Next, Dave Sharrock helps companies and organizations get things done visibly and early by applying an agile lean mindset to product development. Dave has more than 20 years of experience working with product delivery organizations, from Fortune 100 companies to startups, telecommunications to branded consumer goods. A sought-after speaker and consultant, Dave is an expert on organizational change and agile product delivery and the only certified enterprise coach and certified Scrum trainer in Canada. A firm believer in continuous learning, Dave is also an SBC4, SAFe 4.0 program consultant, and holds an MBA and a PhD. Dave moved to Vancouver in 2010 from Europe and leads Agile 42 in North America. And finally, Luke Hohmann is the founder and CEO of Continuo Inc., formerly the Innovation Games Company. Continuo's enterprise software platforms and professional services merge collaboration frameworks, data analytics, and domain expertise to help organizations optimize decision-making in the areas of strategy, innovation, sales, product development, and market research. Luke is also co-founder of Every Voice Engaged Foundation, EVEF, a 501c3 nonprofit that helps citizens, governments, and other nonprofit organizations collaborate at scale to solve technical and wicked problems. So thank you so much for joining us today, Ellen, Dave, and Luke, and go ahead and take it away, guys.
Jack, thanks so much. And I'm really happy to be here today with Ellen and Dave. You know, over the last year, and this marks our 1-year anniversary of doing the Collaboration at Scale webinar series, we've looked at a lot of common challenges in Scrum. And in fact, when we were working on this webinar, Ellen was kind enough to give us a few additional challenges that we didn't even have on this list. So there's a lot of room for growth and a lot of room for exploration. Today, we're going to be building alignment or focusing on building alignment and empathy. And of course, next month, we're going to be looking at managing technical architectures, and that webinar will be up and running in a bit. The speakers there are Chris Richardson of Microservices.io and Dave Pollock, who is the creator of Lift, the framework for Scala, who both experienced architects. But today, let's talk about building alignment and empathy, and let's start with a poll question. And what we're really wondering here is, how well does your work align to customer needs? Give us a thought about how you're doing about this. All right, the responses are rolling in. I'm going to keep this poll open until we get to about 300 plus responses. So if you haven't yet responded, please go ahead and give this question a thought. What we're looking for is both how are you certain that you're understanding your customers, and then how are you certain that you're aligning and building empathy for that? What's really exciting about this, Dave, I don't know, you're a CST, right? So you're responsible for introducing a lot of different people into the Scrum world. And many times, CSTs are often like the tip of the Scrum spear, bringing people in. Would you say that this poll result, where people are indicating a result of being, let's go ahead. Let's see. I want to skip to the poll results. I went too fast. Of being somewhat confident. Dave, do you think that result would be the same for people before they take one of the Scrum classes?
Luke, I think these. I really like the results, because I think the interesting bit is that I'm somewhat confident, because of course that's a very large gray area. When I'm talking to a public group or even within companies, a lot of people have an idea of that they need empathy, they need some understanding of customer needs, but quite frankly, they're very unsure about how to get that. So I think that the large number of people in the I am somewhat confident that this is really what we're trying to do, is give people an idea of tools, practices, frameworks that they can use to increase their confidence. That they have more and more of a closer idea of what customers are looking for. I also like the fact that. Carry on, Luke. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say, I also like the honesty of the people who end up with the I have no idea, or we're supposed to be aligned, because I think it's always very difficult to admit that really we don't always know what's going on, and we don't always have a clear idea of what our customers are looking for.
Right, which is, and I know that you and Ellen do a tremendous amount of work in that area. So let's really dig into this, right? And in today's agenda, we hope to talk about why we need alignment and empathy, but also talk about why it's hard to create, and then some specific frameworks and techniques and how to know if you're doing well. Let's look at this. Alignment isn't empathy. They are separate. Of course, they're related, but they are separate. When we think about this, we have alignment, which is we know what we're going to build and why we're building it. And the second part about this is empathy, which is we care about who we're building for this and why it matters to them. Ellen, when you start working with organizations, and you have a number of frameworks, and I'm excited to introduce the participants to some of your frameworks. I know that a lot of your work is often you're asked to start with building alignment, but I know that you personally introduced this notion of empathy. Tell me why empathy is important to your clients. Why is it that empathy matters to them?
Well, I think that a lot of us focus, first of all, the issue of alignment and getting to the why is really important, because, and it relates to the empathy, because we don't have alignment unless we have a connection to a purpose. And that purpose is about what we do, for whom we do it, and why we do it. So empathy is something different than sympathy or understanding. Empathy is walking in that other person's shoe. It's not just observing and learning and understanding, but it's more about heart. And I love the way that you put this slide together, Luke, because it shows a heart on the right. So this is the who. And we were talking also before in preparing, we were talking about one of the, to get to empathy, one of the books that's such a great book by Kathy Sierra called Badass, Making Users Awesome. And this goes to the point about empathy because the focus of your application, of your product, is not about what people say about the application or the product. They don't use the app because they like it. They use it because they like themselves using it. So to be successful, we need to understand what those users' goals are and help them be successful. And you can only do that by having empathy. I think some of us all are familiar with the poet Maya Angelou, and she said something that resonates around this idea, I think. And she said that people may not remember exactly what you did or what you said, but they will always remember how you made them feel. And that goes to the heart of empathy, I think.
Well, and Dave, how does that relate to kind of, the traditional notion of, and we talked about this actually last month, Bernie and I, the notion of business value and effort and cost. Like, I'm going to make a lot of money off of this feature, and in fact, Dave, I'm excited to introduce the participants to the business poker that you have. But when I look at the attributes of your business poker game, I'm going to call you on the spot here, bud. Your business poker game says, hey, are we going to make money? Are we going to save money? Are we going to draw on new customers? And that feels all really businessy. And how does that businessy focus interact or relate to empathy?
That's a great question. I think a lot of the times, and Scrum trainers or any sort of Agile consultants you may work with, coaches you may work with, we often end up focusing on the framework and on the mechanisms to do certain things. I think if you look at retrospectives as an example, sometimes we focus more on how to run a retrospective than the real value behind it, which is exactly about building empathy. So if I come back to the business value game that we'll talk about later on, one of the things that I find really valuable about that has nothing to do with the numbers. That's an outcome. We get some sort of ranking of different ideas coming through, but the real value in that is seeing the stakeholders discuss the numbers. Because now we begin to understand how people, how different roles, different stakeholders value different aspects of our business, understand how users interact with the products that we're building, and so on. So sometimes if we only focus on the frameworks, I think we're missing out on the reality of how those frameworks are played out, how the mechanisms work, and that observation of empathy in action, if you like. Because I think.
Do you think we need both? Do you think we need both?
If I look at, when I'm looking at this slide and I just put my hand over the heart, the right-hand side, and we just focus on the left-hand side, that's the classic build it and they will come mentality. And that may have worked in the past, a long time in the past. But nowadays, they're a lot more aware than that. There are also many, many choices out there. We need to create, as I think Ellen put it really eloquently, apps and products that make people feel good. And understanding what makes people feel good is the only way we're going to come close to that.
Now, so this is pervasive, right? So when we were preparing this deck, right, I was wondering, well, what do impact? What do these things impact? And I was really kind of curious because, Ellen, you took the first stab at this between the three of us when we were talking about what is this impact, and if you gave me a lot of feedback, but I think what you were trying to tell me was, Luke, alignment and impact basically. They impact everything, right? And you specifically identified some of these areas. Talk to me about, well, why would empathy and alignment impact a road mapping session or a project liftoff or a release planning session? Tell me, tell me why this matters here.
Well, a lot of reasons. If you take road mapping to begin with, I mean, the road map is the the product roadmap is a tool to visually depict how the product's evolving over time to realize the vision and how it's going to achieve value. So we go back to the vision, we go back to the why, and for who we serve, which is what the heart of alignment is about, our purpose. What we're building is why are we building it and for whom are we building it. So if we don't understand that, the roadmap, you can, leave Alice in Wonderland, right? Yeah, any road will do. So you want to go to the end game, which is what the vision is, and we need to have everyone that's involved in the building aligned to it. And, like Dave said, there's lots of products out there and lots of really good products out there, but they don't resonate with people because we haven't had that empathy and we haven't gotten on the same page about it. So and Dave, as Dave said too, it's not so much the end product, like with the framework that he's going to be sharing, as well as other ones we'll be looking at. It's the process of going through that, the building of the alignment, the building, moving from sympathy and observation to true empathy that has an impact day to day on the builders in the work. So our roadmap has to solve problems and exploit opportunities and make users badass users and feel good about themselves. So it's giving us the whole background, but the whole framework for building the roadmap. And a liftoff, which is such a powerful tool for getting a team aligned, also includes one of the three elements. Well, there are three in a liftoff: purpose, alignment, and literally called alignment, and context. And if you look at purpose, it's the vision and the mission tests for the team. And again, we go back to the why and the who. The team can't have its own internal alignment unless they're aligned to who we're building the product for. So those are a couple of really powerful examples. All our work is based on having shared understanding of the big why and who.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that. Like Marie Lord in the chat log says, this sounds very much like voice of the customer. And Ellen, the way I'm going to interpret what you said, and I'm going to link it to her chat comment, I think you and I think all three of us would agree, to get alignment and empathy, I do need to interact with the voice of the customer or interacting with the customer. But again, they're not necessarily the same thing, but they feed each other, meaning it's hard to have alignment on the business value if I'm not engaging with my customers. It's hard to actually care about their problems or their needs if I'm not engaging with our customers. So I think that one of the ways I can get alignment and empathy, and we'll talk about some frameworks to be used in that process, is through this voice of the customer and transformation process. Let's look at some of the challenges that we get, because we don't get these for free, right? We have challenges associated with alignment and empathy. So the first thing is that when we're talking about alignment, we have a mental model, right, where let's say that we've got two team members, Joe and Satish. And Joe has his beliefs about what's important about customers, his priorities about business value, his expectations about what the effort is of items. And, of course, Satish has his own versions of this. The mental model we hold of each other's, though, determines whether or not we're in alignment. If Joe has an accurate model of not only his beliefs and priorities and Satish's model, then Joe will be more in alignment with Satish. And similarly, if Satish has the same understandings as Joe, they will be more in alignment. What we end up having ultimately is a high-performing team have both internal alignment, they rank items the same, and an external alignment where they can predict the ranking of others. And this is where we start to get into high performance. But now we get into some challenging things because building alignment can be hard. Dave, what was really interesting to me when we were building this deck is you immediately, in our very first conversation, started talking about the challenges of building alignment within a team before the challenges of building alignment across teams. So let's talk about some of the challenges that you find and some of the things that you've found that you can resolve when you're trying to build alignment within a given team.
Yeah, and so I think the reason I start with that is I always see the team as the building block. If you can't get alignment inside a team, then trying to get alignment across teams is not going to work. So many, and it's interesting just looking at this slide, many of the challenges of getting alignment inside a team are the same as challenges of getting alignment across many teams. Just things like distance. As soon as you've got distributed teams or individuals distributed, and I always argue if you're not in the same area of the building, you're not sitting around a table, you're basically a distributed team. It's just time zone is going to add more of a delay there. But cultures, second languages, nowadays many people are hearing things in a different way. So when I look at Joe and Satish, the slide that you have there, the interesting thing is that validation of those understandings. That's why we need to continually go back. And whether it's on a team and how they work, it's me as Joe validating what I think Satish is trying to do, think, where he's trying to go, and so on. And that validation is that continuous checking of those ideas. That's where the engagement piece comes from. I need to continually build empathy by testing my assumption that they're thinking in a certain way. And so I'm going to go and either do that through conversation on the team, or if it's between teams, each team has to validate their understanding of what the other teams may be thinking or doing. And of course, if it's from teams to customers, the same thing, is we're validating our understanding in order to build deeper and deeper empathy and understanding there.
So I'm going to key on something that you said right at the beginning, and that you think of the team as a building block. And so do you think that, and I'm going to dip ahead into some of the future slides, but Dave, does that imply that Scrum Masters and other people within an Agile organization or a Scrum-centric Agile organization, they need to be kind of thinking about teams as units, not in a negative way, like, oh, there's some fungible resource, but hey, let's look at the team as a healthy unit, and let's make sure that each individual team is healthy, so that as we show in this slide, if two teams are working on a component, the B and B in the lower right, they're actually aligned within each other, but as a team, they're healthy between each other. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that's a great description. And I'm going to just pick up that beginning of your description there, which is thinking of teams as units, as healthy units, as in many ways the organizations we work in look at individuals, and we're very fine-tuned into looking at individuals and looking at teams. And just as an example, the high performers on a team and things like this, we really want to be focused on how the team operates as a whole, and help the whole team succeed and work together, as it were. So again, if you look at this where you've got teams beginning to get alignment within a team, now they can really begin influencing other teams and learning where other teams are going, and then you get alignment across teams. But you need that team, first of all, beginning to understand and work with one another so that they trust. If one person is disagreeing with the consensus, there's a conversation there, and there's an understanding of where that different view may be coming from.
Well, now let's look at this, and Ellen, I'm going to switch back to you for a second. This can be hard, and building products can be hard, and I was trying to find a mechanism or a picture like the previous one that showed empathy, and I finally decided that, it's like Captain America, right? We fight for our users seems to be the theme that you were presenting about empathy. So let me ask you point blank, do you think this picture is helpful or harmful when thinking about empathy? And and how we might feel about our users.
Well, it is a little violent, but that might be, being having brought up two sons. Sorry, that's part of my ethos background. But yes, in the sense that you are a champion, and that I think that our central character with backup of his team shows that we are really champions. And like that idea, Scrum uses the quote role of the product owner. I actually like the term product champion. And actually, it's everyone's responsibility, not just one person's, although that single person may make the ultimate participatory decision. We all need to be a champion. So from that sense, I like the picture.
Well, let's see. Let's look at this notion of the alignment, right? And for participants, what's your alignment? And I'm going to go back to the previous slide to make sure that you have the definitions. You have weak alignment, whether it's internal or external. You have strong internal alignment, meaning you all agree on the priorities, but maybe not strong external alignment. You have strong external alignment. You can really predict each other, but you're kind of all over the map. You haven't aligned on what you want to build. Or you have really strong internal and external alignment. You'd really like to create a high-performing team. So let's see where you feel that you are with your team. And we've now got 510 participants. So I think we're going to get some really delicious data and some really delicious results from this poll. Let's get it up to about 350 or 400 and see where things stand. All right. And I believe that people can continue to give us poll results. The poll is still, I guess the poll got closed. Sorry about that. So there's strong internal alignment within teams. I think that's really good. But I'm also, there's roughly a third of the teams out there that have weak alignment. And the external alignment isn't as strong as I was hoping for. So I think, Dave and Ellen, this is our clear signal that we might want to start talking about frameworks that helps us build and improve alignment. And let's start with frameworks for aligning on vision, because Ellen, you said that was one of the things that alignment and empathy affects, vision and road mapping and release planning and things like that. So talk to me about some of the frameworks on aligning on vision. And I'm going to ask you explicitly to talk about a vision Mandela, because that was a new framework for me that you introduced me to, and it may be new to the other participants.
Sure. So a mandala is Sanskrit for an archetype. It's a universal pattern, a circle. A circle, it suggests wholeness, it suggests connection, it suggests common elements coming together. So that image that you see on the right is actually taken from a vision and road mapping workshop that I facilitated with a team of about 15-ish product managers. And what you have around the edges of it are themes and ideas that come together in those circles. So you have to see the rays, which are mostly yellow sticky notes, and then they come together into a theme to then come to a common vision. So the idea is that you get the diverse perspectives of the participants, and that, of course, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, you're not just guessing what your customers need, because that's going to be a very key part of the vision. You need to do some research and use some models and frameworks to understand that. So you can use the mandala vision to record the themes that then, just looking at what you have here on the slide on the top left, the cover story, which is also a really cool framework, and you could take those themes and use those in, say, the big headlines or even the sidebars. So these different frameworks all interrelate to each other. And I found that the mandala, because of that universal element of the circle, was a really powerful way to very quickly get people to converge. And then we eventually, you can sort of see it on the top right, pulled out words that became ultimately the new product vision.
Cool. Now, Dave, I know that sometimes you're working on really, really gnarly technical underpinning stuff, and a cover story or a mandala, and it looks like I've misspelled that, so thanks, Rebecca, for the catch. Sometimes what people need is just like an as-is or in a to-be state. And so is there any special advice you have about, using as-is and to-be drawings or pictures or structures?
I really like the as-is to-be. I'm very analytical in my background, so I like the clarity that you get with the as-is to-be. And again, coming back to your point earlier on about bringing empathy into the conversation, I think that one of the risks with an as-is to-be is that we already know what the to-be is going to be. And so that can be either because there's some very strong opinions in the room as that is created, or the solution may already have been outlined or defined in some way, or it's understood that it's going to be in a certain direction. And so the only concern I have when doing the as-is to-be is bringing it back around to that customer empathy piece. So I like actually to start with vision statements, whether it's the cover story or a product vision box or the positioning statement that you have here. Really understand that. I also like to add a bit of numbers there, so we've got some real, we're able to look at what success looks like. And then as we create the as-is to-be diagrams or that sort of structure that we may do in a workshopping session, we can validate the to-be against our original thoughts as to what the customers are looking for, and make sure that the ideas that we've generated are actually going to move us in the direction we identified was success was going to be, whatever that might be: increased performance, more engagement on different levels, higher levels of interaction, or whatever the end goal is. We can validate that to be against the vision statement.
Yeah, and I'll add mine because I'm going to kind of represent a little bit of the product management community and the product owner community. These are all really powerful, and what I would add to that is I like the classic positioning statement. This comes from Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, and I use this internally at Contenio when we're trying to make sure that we're clearly positioning ourselves. And what's interesting is we find this really helpful to remind our team about what we're building and why we're building it. I would also add that cover story, curiously, can be done with customers. There are times where at Contenio we'll bring our strategic customers into a room for a design jam, and when we're building something really big and exciting, we'll actually ask our customers to do a cover story as if they were working for Contenio about how they would describe what we're doing. And we find that process aligns our team on what our customers want, but it also helps us align those items with us. And cover story, Ellen talked about David Sibbitt in her chat. Cover story is originally attributed to David Sibbitt also. He's one of the grand masters of these techniques. Now let's look at what we might want to talk about in terms of aligning on the priorities as opposed to the vision. And Dave, I'm going to go to the business value poker. Could you describe that framework? Because right off the bat, when we introduced it, we had a couple of the participants. Debbie indicated that she was interested in that. I put a URL for trying a version of it in Weave, but tell us about the business value poker, because a lot of us are familiar with points-based estimating or planning poker.
Sure. So if I start with that role of the product owner or product champion is to maximize the return on investment in a purely numerical sense. In order to do that, we need to know both the value and the effort estimated. And we have, in many organizations, there's a good understanding of how to estimate effort, but very little understanding of how to estimate value, because it is a tough, complex problem to figure out. So with the business value poker, all we're really doing is estimating value in the same way that we estimate effort, in many cases using a planning poker type model. We kind of jokingly, we set that up and we multiply the planning poker numbers by 100 so they're distinct from effort. We'll have the same sort of model, Fibonacci sequence of numbers that represent value. It's classic, we're doing sort of comparative value estimates, so we're going to start with a baseline for a particular feature or a customer journey that we're going to build, and then our stakeholders are going to come together and actually do relative estimation of value. I talked earlier on, I mean, the mechanism is simple. It's planning poker for value. The way it works is really powerful and interesting, because just as when we're estimating effort, the people who are doing the work are going to be estimating effort. When we're estimating value, we're bringing stakeholders together. It's often C-level or VP individuals coming together, and they're often responsible for very different parts of how the business, how the product is being developed. So the conversations that emerge as these individuals are discussing and voting using that mechanism can be very, very powerful and very interesting. And so what we'll often do is we ask the product owners to come through and present what will be estimated on, but also to stay and watch the conversation. So we often just have product owners as a team watching the stakeholders debate and discuss where the value is in different ideas and different user journeys, for example, or features that are being discussed. Because it's that conversation that helps us get alignment and empathy for what the stakeholders are really trying to achieve with their product as they go forward.
Thanks. I mean, that's really helpful. And so the idea here is that we're having the same conversation. Now, I'm going to lightly cover the impact effort matrix, because the last Scrum Alliance webinar did a deep dive into it. And this is where we're just placing items by both business value and the effort or the cost, which actually covers the two core attributes that are required in a Scrum product backlog item as defined by Scrum. I think, and I think we've also covered by feature in the past, which is a way to allocate money. Ellen, though, you talked about Kano or Kano, depending on how people like to talk about it. That framework may be new to participants, so could you give a little bit of an overview of that, since that's one of the ones that you felt was important for helping people align on priorities?
Yeah, sure. This is a tool that was developed in the 80s by Professor Mariki Kano as a way to distinguish elements of features and differentiate them along different dimensions. So you can see sort of in the middle, it's really an XY axis of satisfaction. That's the customer satisfaction. And then investment, or the degree of implementation. And you can sort of see that basically you array your items along these different dimensions. So I'm pointing right now to the delighters. And delighters are things that people don't expect but truly enjoy and like in the product. And then you have satisfiers, which are things that need to be in the product. The more, the better of those are also called performance features. And then these basic expectations, if you don't have those, they would be missed. You know, it's like a pencil would need to have an eraser. A customer might not tell you, I need an eraser, but they would expect them. So sometimes they're called expectors. Now, just to tell a story about weaving this together with empathy, in one experience that I had combining empathy, a form of empathy mapping, we got deep into the voice of the customer, and then we moved to the Kano model. And we were working on a product that was basically an interactive voice response for a pharmaceutical product that treats people with a disease that has a lot of stigma. And what I had everyone do is play one of those voices of the customer, such as the patient themselves who has limited ability to interact with this app, and family members and people that are in formulary at the hospitals and physicians and so forth. And what we ended up doing was plotting the features along these dimensions based on who you were representing, who you had empathy for. And by doing this, we discovered a capability for the family members who are really advocates for the patient and who themselves suffer in many ways in supporting the patient. We discovered a feature that turned out to be a delighter, big-time delighter, and it was something very simple that was easy to add to the capability, to the product, to provide references for other family members through the National Institute of Health and so on. And it was something that was they were able to do having moved from empathy and then using this Kano model tool. And it really made a big difference in the end product.
Excellent. And I'll also point out that this is precursoring something that we're going to talk about later in the deck, which is this notion of role play as a way to build empathy and focus on priorities. Mm-hmm. Now, Ellen, you have this powerful framework for aligning on product options. Could you briefly give people an overview? And I'm going to let everyone know in the webinar that there's no possible way that Ellen can give a thorough description of this in this short of a webinar. She wrote an entire book about it. But Ellen, I think it's a powerful enough framework that I want to make sure that the community gets briefly introduced to it.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So this is a tool for alignment around the product to help everyone get a shared understanding of the most important product options to deliver and to assemble the highest value options into cohesive, highly cohesive, loosely coupled chunks which get allocated to your teams. And I want to go back to that idea of coupling and cohesion. You might remember from classic software engineering. Coupling is the degree of interdependence, and especially in a large product with scaled teams, we want to minimize that. We want low coupling. And cohesion is the degree of relatedness within a module or a feature. So we want our scaled teams to be working with highly cohesive, loosely coupled requirements. And this is, of course, going to increase productivity, build domain knowledge, and get to the value that we're trying to get. So as you can see, there are 7 product dimensions. And we explore each of these dimensions that give us a holistic understanding of requirements. So the dimensions as a set, the 7 of them as a set, represent what's classically called functional and non-functional requirements. So we're looking at the users that interact with the users, meaning people, systems, and devices that interact with the product, how they connect with the product through the interface. The actions are the behaviors and capabilities, the data, the product, and information it retains. Controls or policies and regulations and rules the product enforces. The environment is, if it's a physical product, the physical properties, and for any product, it's the technology, hardware, and software platforms. And then, of course, we have quality attributes, which are the properties that describe the operation and development of the product, like usability, security, reliability, performance, all those little things. So basically, in a sum, the framework is like a fractal for using in discovery across planning horizons. So if you're looking at a big view like a product roadmap planning horizons, leaders can align across the entire product and come up with these cohesive, highly cohesive, loosely coupled feature sets that then get allocated to teams. And we do the same thing at the preview, like a mid-level, a release level, where multiple teams are working on a feature set, and then more informally within a Scrum team at the now view. And I say it's fractal-like because you have these cascading similar patterns of your product that's respecting, if you will, the fact that requirements are multi-dimensional. So you can scale your product requirements with an evolving symmetry. And another real big benefit is it increases domain knowledge as you use it. So it really,
and just to confirm what you said, this is the kind of framework that, leaders might use to really capture and clarify. For example, if you're a fintech company, you don't get to choose the regulations that you have to honor in terms of the international banking system and standards. But if you've got a large distributed team, you certainly need to communicate the set of standards that are required for the product. So the way I'm hearing this is that not every single person should or have a vote in creating the content, because sometimes the content is given, but instead this is a really powerful tool for capturing it in a single way, a single framework, and communicating that effectively. Would that be about right?
Yeah, and we even have teams, cross teams using it, right? So on a whole feature set as well. So it does have this cascading effect. And so we're really getting a deeper shared understanding on what the product is from a requirements point of view, and that's what the whole team is very focused on building.
Excellent. Well, now let's look at some frameworks for building empathy. And we're going to start with a couple of things. One that I'll contribute right away, which is personas. Many of the participants know about personas, which is a representative of the target market. They're fictional people, but they help us understand who we're building for and why. Another very commonly known framework is the empathy map. This version that I'm showing is from Cisco, but there are other versions which help us build empathy for customers, as customer journey maps do. The two that I want to focus on in this slide are two new ones that may be unaware to the participants in the community. And the first is the Atlassian Experience Canvas. And Dave, you contributed this one as a means for helping people build empathy. Could you give us a brief overview of where this is? And for the participants, please know that we have a link at the end of the deck to a discussion about the Atlassian Experience Canvas that you can get. So it's in the references. But Dave, give us a bit of an overview of this one.
Yeah, so the Experience Canvas, and this, as many of the Canvas models which are out there, is all being based on Alex Osterwalder's business model Canvas, is sort of the proto Canvas that started all of this. The Experience Canvas, from what we're trying to achieve there, is looking at the customer's experience. What is the experience that they currently have with the product or service, and what is the experience we would like them to have, and what's the assumption that will happen when that changes. So as with any canvas, it's really coming up with a hypothesis, a model of behavior, in this case customer behavior, and then using that to make sure we validate that those changes that we're going to introduce actually generate the changes, the change in behavior we're expecting. So if I take as an example, let's say a travel website, and we have a hypothesis that the consumer's experience, the customer's experience, is not as good as it could be when it comes to picking flights, for example, and we want to make a change to that search algorithm because we think it will increase make the experience better. We're going to sort of document it on an experience canvas and come up with an idea of what we think will happen. And then as we go forward and start either talking to customers or proofing things out, we're going to be continually checking to make sure that what we think will happen actually happens. What I find really useful here is a couple of things. One is that conversation about what the hypotheses are, because we begin to get alignment, that internal and external alignment that we talked about earlier on. And we begin as a team to be able to maybe predict what we think is going to happen. The second thing is that validation piece, because in so many cases, it's more of a scattergun approach. People come up with ideas, they release them, and when there's a success, everybody tries to claim that success is tied to a particular feature they've been championing. And with the experience canvas, it allows us to learn much more closely and become much more attuned to how our customers actually behave, how our users behave when they interact with our product. And it's a little bit more, you learn much more rapidly. And what you typically learn is you need to build more empathy, because what you think your customers do, they don't do. They don't behave the way we think they do, because, of course, people are complex. They've got many different drivers. So this is that starting point. It's putting a line in the sand to say, we think if we change this, our customers will change in this way, and then using that to validate and learn as we go forward.
Excellent. And I would definitely encourage the participants to read further about this, both at Agile 42 and or Atlassian. Now, Ellen, can you give us an overview of the product partners framework from discover to deliver? Because I thought this was a very interesting look at how business and technology interact with the customer.
Yeah, I mean, successful products need to incorporate multiple perspectives, and obviously we've been focusing a lot on the user. What we want to do is make sure that we understand holistically who are the stakeholders, and I prefer to use the word product partners, and they come from those three realms: the customer, business, and technology, right? The customer users and choosers, the business, the sponsors, and the people that are making the effort actually happen, product champion, providers, and then, of course, the builders, the technology builders and training and support and so forth. So the idea in this framework is what we do is we first understand who the people are in those three domains, if you will, customer, business, and technology, and then we explore what they value, what their value considerations is, because we are talking a lot about empathy for the customer, but and that is really crucial. At the same time, we need to have a balanced view. We can't ignore whether the product is feasible to build, which is one of the perspectives we get from technology, or whether it's even viable from a business point of view. So this gives us a balanced view of value, because value is truly in the eyes of the beholder, and we need to look at all three of these domains.
Excellent. Now, I'm going to briefly cover this because I'm super fast, because Ellen, you introduced this concept earlier where you talked about the power of persona role play. And my experience is that complex software will have between 3 and 6 personas, and it can be very hard for the developers, especially in distributed teams, to get them. And Ellen, we do exactly what you said. We ask the participants in the teams to act as if they are a persona and play according to how that persona would play. You talked about how that persona would rank features using Kano. I've done this with buy a feature, where here's a list of features, which persona would buy what feature, and why is that feature important to them? So I think that this is a more broadly applicable concept, and I have found that this is a very compelling way to help people engage in really understanding and building empathy for the users of their systems. Now, there's 2 other additional frameworks, and I'll cover them briefly. The first is the apprentice, which is actually using your own product. Sometimes this is called eating your own dog food. I really don't like that phrase, because hopefully you're not building dog food, you're building great software. At Contenio, we call this drinking our own champagne. And we like to think that we're building really awesome software, and so we use our software all the time. The second thing is me and my shadow, which is traditional ethnography, where you're going to go out in the field and observe customers using your product. Now, what I would put on a warning, because this is the Collaboration at Scale webinar, and we're really focused on scale, is that this is super powerful, but it's not incredibly or highly scalable, and it's something to be cautious about. We've got a few more slides to cover, and one of them is how to know if people are doing well. How do they know if they're starting to improve empathy? One is a tool called Scrum Nosy, and Scrum Nosy enables you to determine if you have alignment within the roles, processes, and artifacts within a Scrum team. Scrum Nosy was created in collaboration with Jeff Sutherland, and it includes some advice from some leading experts in the Agile community. So that's one technique for building alignment. The other technique that I want to introduce is the role pointer. Ellen, this is something that you've developed, and so I'd like you to talk about this with the group as briefly as you can.
Yeah, we use this often in liftoffs or teams that need to have a liftoff. Sometimes we call it a matchup, where each person creates their own worksheet here, and then we fill it out. So you see in the quadrants, you can pretty much see the roles I depend on, the roles depend on me on the top right. Here's what I need from them to do my job well, and here's what they need from me. And what we do is we let people basically walk the walls and explore each other's and sign up for each other's. And it's very, very powerful. I've got lots of stories about this, but this really gives people internal alignment and clarifies what do we need from each other to be successful, and how can we make each other on our team awesome.
I love it, and I like the clarity of this. And you know, Ellen, when you and I were talking about the webinar, I said it reminded me of the class responsibility and collaborator cards that the old OO community, you know, the object-oriented community used to use. And so I really just love this approach. Team, we're moving into our summary, so let's look at this. And I think it's pretty straightforward, right? Is stakeholders need to, and Dave, you gave us this, right? When we said, how do we summarize this? Dave just plowed this out. He's like, look, you need alignment and empathy between stakeholders to agree on the product, across the teams to build a cohesive product, and with the user to build a successful product. So I think that that's a really powerful summary, and I want to introduce, and Dave and Ellen, while I'm doing some cleanup here, you guys might want to scan the questions that Jack flagged. We might have time to knock off one or two. Here are some books and websites that we referenced in this. We've got a couple of Ellen's books, the Badass Making Users Awesome book, and also a really powerful framework is Start With Why from Simon Sinek. And we've got a couple of links about business value poker and Atlassian experience from Agile 42, which I really appreciate. Well, now, kids, we are at the stage of the webinar where you get to pick the September webinar. So here's our poll question. What do you want us to cover in the Collaboration at Scale webinar for September? Give us your choice. And while people are giving us their choices for the next webinar, Anjita Bhatti talked about the IBM Design Thinking Field Guide, and it's a great document and a great reference. And so I went on the internet, and you can get it for free from IBM, which is very nice of IBM. And so I put the link into that version. Okay, we're at 300 poll responses with a couple of things emerging as potential lead. So I don't want to show the results yet. I want to see if we can get at least 400 responses. So if you haven't responded to the poll yet about what we will do in the September webinar, please give us your responses. We're slowing down a little bit, but I want to see this. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and show the results right now. And it looks like impact mapping. And I think this is really exciting. Jack, we've been asking about impact mapping for the last year, but it never really seemed to have emerged as the top contender. But right now, it seems that impact mapping is not yet, or is going to emerge as our September webinar, which is really exciting. For the participants who chose My Topic Isn't Listed, please email me your topic so that we can get it into the webinar series. Jack or Dave or Ellen, is there a question that you think is short enough that you can knock off in a quick minute so that we can hand it back to Jack for closing?
I'm not sure this is a quick minute, but let me try and give a response to the first question and the last question, which is about measuring empathy. My feeling is you can't measure empathy. I don't think you get a number that tells you what empathy is. I think there are lots of proxies for it. We can get a feeling for it. We can talk to customers and get surveys and so on that give us a measure. But the real impact of good understanding of empathy is a hugely successful product. So it's one of those amorphous things that you see it because the product take up and the usage by customers is very, very strong. But trying to measure it in the journey as you're trying to get alignment and empathy is incredibly challenging. One of the challenges around that.
So I'm going to summarize it this way. I think what you might be saying is that alignment and empathy are kind of like sleep. You can't store it. You have to get it almost every day, and you have to continually regenerate it.
Well said.
Yes, exactly. You did a lot better than I did there.
Anyway, thank you, everyone. Jack, turn it over to you, my friend. Bring us home.
All right, excellent. So Luke, Dave, Ellen, thank you guys so much for an excellent presentation. Again, these the questions that everyone presented have been documented, and we will provide a Q&A document within the following weeks. So that way, if you did not get your questions answered during this webinar, we will work to get them out soon. This webinar is being recorded, so please look for an email from Scrum Alliance Webinars within this week. It will include a link to the slide deck along with a copy of the recording. Now, we do usually host webinars in the categories of Scrum Fundamentals, Agile Leadership, and of course, Collaboration at Scale. So please keep an eye out for social media and our newsletters for any upcoming webinars. And if any of you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at support@scrumalliance.org. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat window right now. And then again, Luke, Dave, Ellen, thank you guys so much for an excellent webinar.
Thanks so much, and Ellen and Dave, thank you guys so much. It was just awesome to do this with you, and I really enjoyed every part of this process.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks a lot.
Everyone have a good day. Thank you.